All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. I will give about 2 minutes for people to join in. We have a really exciting topic for you guys today, so we'll start in about just a minute. I always see people coming in within the first 5 minutes, so I'll give everyone some time. We'll start in about just a minute. Today we have people coming from a lot of different platforms, so we're expecting a lot of people, so we can't wait. Alexis, Dave, how are you guys doing this morning?
Doing great. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Oh my goodness, apparently something in the background.
I always do that. I always trigger Alexa.
Yeah, I have one too, and I dare not say her name. That's funny. Sorry, Dave, what you were saying?
Oh no, I was just saying, yeah, it's I'm out here in the suburbs of Seattle. We've had a pretty crazy windstorm last night. It's still going on, but luckily power is on, internet is good, so looking forward to the conversation.
Oh yeah. Okay. Speaking of the Pacific Northwest, Northern California is experiencing the coldest winter it has in like a century. So that's super fun over here where I am.
Huh.
I'm having to pull out all my coats. All right. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started. People are going to continue to jump in. That's fine. But thank you everyone for joining. My name is Nicole Golish and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. We have a really great topic for you guys today. We're going to talk about cloud-to-cloud workload migrations and everything that comes with it. Drivers, the benefits, the challenges. And with that, we have two great presenters, two industry experts. So I wanted to give them a chance to introduce themselves. So Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Reyes. I'm the Director of Solution Architecture. I also lead the migration efforts and programs here at DigitalOcean.
All right. Thanks. And then Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Dave McCarthy. I'm a research vice president at IDC, and I'm our lead analyst when it comes to cloud infrastructure. And if you're not familiar with IDC, we're a company that's been in business for actually this year, 60 years, doing both market intelligence and advisory services. And even it's funny, when I was looking earlier this year, I realized this is my 30th year in the industry. So it's pretty crazy. It's an amazing time to be talking about cloud and the things we're going to discuss today.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah, that's awesome. Not only is that a personal milestone, I mean, that's going to put you in a position to give us a really interesting industry perspective, see how the industry has evolved.
It also makes you feel a little old too.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So really quick, what you guys can expect from this session, get a front row seat to an honest and open conversation between two cloud industry experts. So we have Dave and Alexis here, and they're just going to chat about their thoughts, their industry perspective on cloud-to-cloud workload migration. So coming from one cloud to another cloud, and what it takes to migrate specific workloads, AI, ML workloads, Kubernetes workloads, et cetera. And then the next is you'll gain clarity on key drivers. So we talked about how we will discuss challenges, benefits, risks, drivers behind cloud-to-cloud migrations and how they'll influence strategy and timing, two very important things when considering migration. And then lastly, at the end, we'll give you some insight into real-world challenges and mitigation approaches through customer examples. And this will help you with your own cloud migration journey, or so we hope. Okay. So cloud-to-cloud workload migration, let's talk about it. Here is where the conversation will start. This is where we will get right into what we call a fireside chat. And it's really just, again, our two industry experts chatting about the topic. So today, again, to reemphasize, we'll be talking about cloud-to-cloud workload migration. So moving from one cloud to another. And at this point, I'll hand it off to Dave. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, so part of my responsibility, actually like one of my privileges being able to work at IDC, is I get to look across the entire industry and identify the trends that are happening both in cloud technology as well as cloud adoption. And one of the things that I'm responsible for is a global survey called Cloud Pulse. And so this is run 4 times a year. And we ask about 1,300 cloud buyers around the world, what is it that they're thinking about? What is it that they're doing? What are their plans for the next couple of years? And one of the interesting things that emerged over the last year is this idea of cloud modernization. And one of the pieces of data that came out of this was that 82% of cloud customers are rethinking their cloud strategies. So what I mean by that is that typically when you hear about a modernization story, you would hear about it either I have a old legacy application that I'm trying to turn more cloud native, or I'm taking something that was maybe an on-premises application and moving it into cloud. The cloud isn't new anymore. And so companies that have been using cloud for a while are realizing that it's time to kind of take a look again at both like how they're building their applications, whether there's new technologies. So it's really not saying like take an old application or what might have been considered a legacy application and bring it to cloud, but it's like re-looking at the cloud environments that you already have. And so again, some of it is a technology conversation, but the other part of it is to look at who you do business with in the cloud. And so it's not that long ago where there was only a couple of choices that people would look at. Now there's so many different options, and that's why it's great here to talk with DigitalOcean about the capabilities that they have, because we're seeing more and more customers realize that perhaps some of their initial cloud experience or the original cloud provider they chose didn't give them everything that they wanted, and that time is right now, and to sort of relook and reevaluate. And by the way, of course, the whole interest in AI is also sparking this as well, because that kind of sort of forces companies to take another look at their strategies and what they're doing. So this is kind of the basis of what's driving, I think, this idea of cloud to cloud migration. So, again, starting in one cloud and perhaps moving to another. So I'd love to bring Alexis into the conversation, and we can kind of start talking through some of the points that we had planned for.
All right, great. Let's do it. Okay. So I have some questions, but I want to make sure that I open the questions to the audience. So if anyone from any of our streaming platforms has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will get to them throughout our fireside chat. So I'll go ahead and start. The first thing I wanted to open the conversation with is, what are the drivers that motivate companies to switch clouds?
Yeah, so I'll start with this one. A lot of it has to do with looking at cost optimization. So prior to this idea of like cloud modernization moving into cloud, we had seen many signals from the market that customers weren't really getting, or I should say the bills that they were getting didn't necessarily match their expectations. Or maybe said a different way is they tried to forecast what their spend was going to be, and they put some numbers into a calculator and it kind of came out the other side. But the reality doesn't always match what you think is going to be. And so this is one of the reasons that people are looking at migrating. So sometimes it's things like pricing model alignment. So for example, oftentimes people talk about like the hidden cost of cloud. They say hidden, but the reality is there was always some fine print in there somewhere. And I guess maybe that's what drives the idea that it's hidden. But in many cases, it was just things that they didn't expect, right? And so, and you look at some of the cloud pricing models, they can be pretty complicated. And especially if you're doing something new, like experimenting with AI, or maybe even just doing a new type of application or using a new service that you hadn't used in the past, you don't always know what your usage patterns are going to be. And so that's one of the areas that's in there. I think the other part too is looking at ways of reducing some vendor lock-in. So one of the things that we had always seen is that from a pure infrastructure perspective, people that were either standardizing on, traditional VMs or moving into containers, would stay at that layer probably because they wanted to make sure that they had some mobility if they needed to move those applications. But of course, there's always things in the platform services that companies want to use. And, some providers are more open standards based than others. And so even if they're starting with an open source project, sometimes they fork it in such a way that you build to that API, and then all of a sudden you try to pick up that application and move it, and it's not so necessarily easy as you would think. So you see people looking at doing that as a way of, either building, more flexibility in the technology that they're doing, or just looking at new commercial terms that are sort of driving some of this reason to do it. And then the other is really trying to find like the right fit. So when we were preparing for this webinar, I was kind of bringing up this idea that every cloud provider has a personality, I guess, or maybe DNA. And of course, every cloud provider started in a particular business and kind of grew into other things. But one of the things that I've found, and it's one of the signals of like maturity, I think, in the market, is, looking at cloud providers that they fit your personality, right? The size of company that you are, the way that you like to work, understanding your needs and giving you assistance in the way that you need it, even if you're a smaller company. And so all of these things, whether it's on like the cost side of things, or whether it's more flexibility, or whether it's, trying to create, some, different ways of kind of matching up services, these are all reasons why people are looking at that sort of thing. Alexis, how do you see that with the DigitalOcean customers?
Yeah, so we're definitely seeing similar patterns, right? So we're seeing more companies, especially the ones that we're talking to that are migrating to DigitalOcean. They migrate to us for a couple of clear reasons. One of them, as you mentioned, is costs, right? So teams are really tired of surprise bills and want pricing that is simple and transparent. Second is complexity. So a lot of organizations, they feel overwhelmed by huge cloud ecosystems and just want something that's easier to run and easier for their engineering teams to learn. No need for 12 certifications just to use a cloud panel. Third is performance and experience. Customers want to be able to improve, if not match, performance at a better price. Customers don't want, the tools that they're using to deploy their applications to slow them down. They want speed and smooth workflows. And finally, you touched on it, it's that vendor lock-in. We're seeing companies that want to disassociate themselves from specific vendor technologies. More DNEs want the freedom to move and to orchestrate more of like a multi-cloud approach to stay portable and stay in control of their architecture and really increase like what makes them unique in the marketplace. So they essentially want to remove all of the dependencies from like vendor specific technologies.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, sorry. We had a comment show up there. Just a LinkedIn user saying that they agree with you and that DigitalOcean has one of the easiest dashboards. Maybe they mean like UI for managing all the services, as they've been using it for 8 years. So thanks for your kudos.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Okay, interesting, Alexis. Thank you for that. The next thing, everything you guys said about, I think it was interesting that you guys both said cost optimization was something that comes into play, because as we go into 2026, that is definitely a trend that, Dave, I'm sure you're seeing, but again, at DigitalOcean, we're hearing with our customers. So it's no surprise that both of you guys said cost optimization. So we talked about drivers motivating companies to switch clouds. So let's say, they made the switch. What benefits of a cloud to cloud workload migration could they expect to see?
Yeah, I can take this one.
Great.
I would say a well-run migration delivers value like right away, and the biggest win is typically cost efficiency. So you can cut spend and get more predictable budget. It's also a great moment to simplify operations, right? To clean up old technical debt and boost performance. For many teams, it's the point where their infrastructure finally matches where their business is today, not where it was like years ago. We see situations where when we are engaging with customers, they might have services running that they didn't even know were running. On migration, when you're really digging into the details and you want to move a workload from one cloud to another cloud, you really need to understand how all the different services, applications, databases, storage, how everything connects with each other. And that really starts to open up conversations around, hey, did we really need this service? Did we really need to provision these services the way that we provisioned it? And that really leads to customers really evaluating their architecture and then simplifying it and optimizing it in the next cloud. And, as I've been mentioning, it also enables for flexibility. It gives companies, the opportunity to now start to explore open technologies and test workloads in another cloud provider, right? Sometimes companies, they pick a cloud provider when they were, an early stage startup, and then 10 years have passed and they're still there in that same cloud provider, and they start to continue to use the services. But really, once they start to run tests and proof of concepts on another cloud provider, they start to understand that, hey, maybe for specific workloads or for specific components, it's better, more cost effective to run on another cloud provider, and it also provides you with that multi-cloud redundancy approach.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up a couple of things, right? One is, again, as an industry analyst, we have all sorts of terms for stuff. And, of course, one buzz term is something like time to value, and which really just means like how quickly can you, get what your outcomes from what you're doing, right? And sometimes I've certainly had conversations with companies where the complexity of certain cloud services and platforms is like a negative drag on that, right? Like if it takes you so long to get up to speed on a new service or what have you, then then it slows you down, and it slows down the benefits that you can get and all of that sort of stuff. And so and then you get back to the sort of the complexity side of things, and that also again continues to drive those sorts of issues. So I do think that being able to move quickly is really important. And I guess the reason why there's always so much pressure on cost is I haven't yet to meet a company that isn't under some sort of budget pressure, or being told, can you add 20 new features, but by the way, you don't get any more money to do it. And so in many cases, what I see people doing, and this is part of I guess, addressing that technical debt, is also like looking for like those efficiencies come in different ways. Like sometimes the efficiency might be in your dev process. The efficiency might be in terms of improved uptime, or maybe it's being able to be smarter around the resources and what you're spending on. Maybe save a little money here so you can do something over there. Like all of those things are kind of part of that modernization story and kind of rethinking. And yeah, my goodness, if you're talking about somebody that's been made some choices 10 years ago, sometimes depending on the company, those environments might be on autopilot for a while. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the question becomes like, how often are you evaluating it? And I've seen everything from we look at it once a quarter, to we look at it once a year, to we look at it only when we need to, which isn't necessarily the best answer. But yeah, so I think this is like all about kind of taking a new look, right, at the things that you're doing. And you mentioned the multi-cloud thing earlier too. I mean, it's probably no surprise that anybody that's been following the industry that there's been some significant outages in the major cloud providers in some form or fashion, right? And all of that has been somewhat not just impacting to like the customer, but it's more like impacting to the customer's customer. And so, building more resiliency into things that companies are doing is another reason why they look at kind of moving, whether it's moving some of their applications into another cloud, using it more in kind of like a DR kind of way, or kind of using it as a way of like load balancing. I think all of that. And then, yeah, like that whole, you mentioned flexibility. Sometimes we'll use the term like agility. Again, it's just everything is coming in so fast. And I think, it's so funny. Every 5 years, there's always like a new way of talking about like the pace of innovation. It's like, it's just been like 10x again from what we were doing before. Like the requests never come in or stop coming in. So the question really becomes like, how quickly as a team can you, be able to react to those requests and service them in a way. And so, I think that modernization gives you that opportunity to, sort of address maybe some of the underlying issues such that you're better equipped to do that, right? And so, and oftentimes, as we were discussing, right, like moving into a new cloud provider or using it as a secondary cloud provider to augment the things that you're doing kind of forces you to take a look to figure out how to do that best.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed. All right. Again, we seem to have a very satisfied LinkedIn user on here. So I just wanted to put one of their anecdotal comments on here. So they said they migrated an application from DigitalOcean to AWS. It didn't perform as expected. As a result, they had to revert back to DigitalOcean. So thanks for sharing your experience. We appreciate it. And, especially an experience that has to do with cloud-to-cloud workload migration. So appreciate that. Okay, so we have kind of already paved a pathway for this, but we talked about some of the negative things that you can experience within certain cloud providers. So I want to talk about now, like as you were talking about downtime and the customer experiencing the grunt of the outage. So I just want to talk about what are the risks and challenges of a cloud-to-cloud workload migration.
Yeah, maybe I'll start and then pass it over to Alexis. But so yeah, right. It's easy to make a case that you should modernize. And it's also easy to make a case that, hey, we talked about these reasons why and all the benefits you get. But the reality is it's not trivial. I think there's ways to make it easier, but there's always going to be, some element of work that has to be done in order to make this happen. And I believe Alexis mentioned it earlier around things like dependencies. I mean, I've heard stories where that can be sometimes one of those blind spots, especially if you have some applications that were written by somebody else that's no longer in the company and you think you've got it all figured out and then you move it somewhere else. And then all of a sudden you find 15 things break and or create some sort of integration issues or interoperability issues. So that's something that you have to, make sure that you're prepared for, right? So this isn't something like you should just do haphazardly. I think it's important to kind of plan it out, make sure you understand, sort of the inventory of what you have, and then, make sure you have a good testing plan and things like that. Data is, sometimes you hear the term like data gravity. And so, that's one of the things that I feel like cloud providers sometimes use as a way of, making the usage of their cloud sticky, because there's always things like data transfer fees and things like that. And not to mention just, making sure that when you take your data and you move it from, point A to point B, that the integrity is there, that you haven't lost anything. And then, the other part of it too is moving to a new cloud often means some element of learning and like a learning curve, or every cloud does things slightly differently. And even if you're using standards like I meant before, like even some open source stuff, it's there's always some differences, and so there's some bit of that. And then finally, you want to make sure that when you're doing this, I guess that's part of that whole planning process and testing process, is making sure that that you can do it in a way that feels invisible to your end users or customers. I mean, that's the the days of saying, hey, we're taking the site down for the weekend or something to do an upgrade are long behind us. Everybody expects things to be like always on all the time. And not to say that you can't have maintenance windows, but I do think that you need to make sure that that you have both, I guess, a rollback plan in the case of moving something that doesn't turn out to work. But even more importantly, like just making sure that you're minimizing any window of disruption that might be impacting to the end user.
Yeah, it's definitely, I would say the biggest worry is exactly that, right? It's the downtime, the customer impact, which is why, careful planning and testing is like super important. Data transfers, as you mentioned, can be very tricky, especially with large globally distributed databases. Some workloads depend on proprietary services, so you might have to like refactor components of your application, choose alternatives. And then, a lot of the engineering teams are just busy, right? Like, taking on a migration can add an additional workload, right? So making sure that you have the right partner to help you with this migration is key. And then you also mentioned around change management, right? Like, when does the migration actually happen? What are the times when your end users are not using the application as much? Is it on a weekend? Is it overnight? And this is where, DigitalOcean really comes in, right? You're not alone in this migration. We guide you through the entire process. We set up what's called like a statement of work that outlines step by step what has to happen during a migration. And we provide hands-on migration assistance, right? Our solution architects do this every day and help build a structure around the proof of concept, around the statement of work. And in many times, with larger workloads, we also cover the cost of a POC, so you're not having to run two clouds at the same time, right? You get to test and then ultimately build confidence before moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I don't really have any follow-ups. I think that you guys talked pretty thoroughly, left me speechless.
Good.
So I do want to take some time, though. We were talking about the nitty-gritty of cloud-to-cloud workload migrations. What are the drivers, benefits, challenges? But now I want to move somewhat forward. So I want to ask you guys, what trends are you, or let's start with this one. How do you see cloud migrations evolving in the next couple of years?
I actually think you're going to see more and more of this. As we discussed, I mean, decisions that you made years ago don't always necessarily fit the current state of business, right? And ultimately, I guess as technologists, we're here not just for the sake of technology. And so, I think we've seen a lot of increase in awareness of like what it takes to make an application more mobile, meaning like able to move from one cloud to the other. And and I think that maybe part of this whole idea of what I mentioned in the beginning around personality means that you're also seeing kind of this like use the right tool for the job. And sometimes that means one cloud might be right for one workload or application, a different cloud might be better for the other one. And even the larger cloud providers you see are becoming slightly more friendly when it comes to enabling more multi-cloud kind of environments. Because I think even they realize that there's not everything that they do that they're best at, right? So to me, I think this becomes more of a like, don't think of it. I mean, just like the move from big monolithic to applications to more microservices and things. I mean, it's the same thing I feel like with these infrastructure environments. You want to make sure that you're looking at ways of staying flexible, being able to do that. I think with AI, you're going to start seeing, I think you'll see more AI assistance, I think, in some of the ways. I mean, you certainly see this happening in some parts of the industry around like code modernization. And, I believe that when people talk about like AI agents in the context of like cloud operations, I think that's another way of kind of becoming a little bit more proactive around some of these environments, and whether that means right sizing resources more proactively, or keeping track of how to kind of keep an idea around costs, which I guess also goes in with that sizing. But the other thing I think that's really important we haven't talked about is just the security side of things as well. And I think we'll continue to see ways where that's going to help in terms of again, reducing complexity, increasing consistency between the different deployments that you're doing. All of those, I think, are going to continue to be trends that we see. And so I guess, I'd wrap it up in like, more like fit for purpose sort of ideas as opposed to just blindly picking resource types and stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And definitely like on the AI space, I think, it's very difficult to predict what's going to happen next year because everything, moves so quickly. But I think, when it comes to migrations, I think everything will become a lot more automated for sure. Instead of people manually planning every step, you can have AI agents that are analyzing workloads, giving recommendations, and even handling the majority of the migration process. I think we're moving towards an agentic era where the agents are the one providing recommendations based off of pricing, performance, capacity, monitoring APIs or MCPs of other cloud providers, and then essentially automatically triggering migration for specific workloads, right? This could be advantageous for companies that are running VPNs or streaming or heavy compute workloads, where the agent will be the one that decides where to migrate or where to scale out, especially in a multi-cloud environment. I also think that troubleshooting will improve significantly. Agents will be able to help identify issues faster, guide teams through fixes, and improving the overall like day-to-day operations. We see this today with Cloudways. So our Cloudways product has what we call like the Cloudways Copilot, and it's an AI-powered assistant that is already helping with diagnosing PHP level, Nginx types of configurations. Where in my previous life, I did a lot of like Nginx, looking at the Nginx log and the access logs and var log files, and really whenever there was an incident, we would go ahead and troubleshoot and review all those logs. I think all of that will be abstracted, and the agents will be able to summarize things a lot faster and help troubleshoot a lot faster. So I think that's something that we're going to be able to see very early, like maybe like in the next 6 months or so, where companies are using agents within their cloud operations.
Yeah, that reminded me of something else that we were talking about in terms of it certainly fits the story of being more proactive, right? So once something breaks and you're sort of scrambling, nobody wants to be in that situation, right? Like you'd like to be on the front end of that and minimize the outage. Or there's always two parts of it. It's like one is like, okay, what's the problem, and then how do you fix it, kind of thing. But this reminded me of something we were talking about before this webinar, which was a little bit of the flaw in this term, like modernization, or at least the way that people have thought about it. So whether it was just, you can almost put anything in front of modernization. The problem is it almost sounds like it's a one-time thing. Like I was not modernized and now I am modernized. And so I can go on my vacation and life is good. But the reality is what ends up happening is that becomes stale over time as well, right? So I think what's going to happen, again, as part of this like future looking thing is, I mentioned sometimes I've talked to companies that said, well, we kind of reevaluate once a year. The agents may play a role in this. They don't have to, but to me, this idea is like, don't think of modernization as a one-time thing. So if you think of like modernization and then you add in that mindset of like continuous innovation, then you should be sort of doing like continuous modernization, just meaning like upping the cycles of how often you look at things. Because again, right, things are moving so fast, and I think there's opportunities out there to gain efficiencies and to take advantage of new features faster if you have that almost like baked into your process to continually look at these things and find ways of improving.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about being proactive, not reactive. That's something that we hear a lot. I want to make sure that we highlight something you talked about, Dave, cybersecurity, just security in general. I want to make sure that we make a point of that so we can circle back to that, because that is interesting. And I do see that coming up more and more, within our work and within customer conversations. So want to make sure that we touch on that. Maybe we'll save it for the end. But you guys already kind of beat me to the punch while you were giving, while you were chatting. So the next question I had for you guys is, what trends are you seeing with customers? And this is a 3-pronged question. So I can repeat it if you ever need me to, but what trends are you seeing with customers who are, 1, leveraging AI? We kind of talked about that. 2, adopting a multi-cloud strategy, or 3, considering a cloud-to-cloud migration. So
Alexis,
why don't we
first shot on this one?
Yeah, I can go first. So when it comes to like AI, what we're seeing is that customers that come to us for like specific like GPU workload, like let's say H100s, they just need specific GPUs for inferencing, like the H100s, H200s, the MI300s from AMD. Once they're on the platform, they usually start to expand into other services, right? So a customer might come to us for just GPUs, and then they ask for databases or compute, so they need like CPUs or even like storage. So they come for inferencing, and then they start using the majority of the stack, right? So we are seeing also a bigger trend on inferencing versus like training, right? So inferencing is very important because this is what is essentially using AI for real world applitions, right? So it's something that will continuously need to run. So we're seeing customers adopt AI on DigitalOcean on that front. On the multi-cloud side, we're seeing customers spread their workloads across multiple clouds to control costs, avoid lock-in. So they might, what we're seeing is that they might pick a particular service or application. For streaming is usually like the edge nodes. Will they have edge nodes spread across multiple cloud providers so that they're closer to the end users that are streaming, for example? We also have customers that might come to us for GPUs and storage, but then keep some of the big data analytics in another provider, right? And then I think the last point was around cloud-to-cloud migrations. So the trend is the same how we have talked about, right? People want less complexity, more predictable pricing. And when they run a POC with us, they see how powerful the platform is and how strong our support team is. And that's usually what motivates them to make the move. Yeah,
those are all like excellent points. So it is funny, I guess we did touch on a few of these things kind of leading into this question. So I'll take it from a different angle. I feel like AI is like one of these things where it's no longer like just a tech kind of conversation. So, AI isn't new if you've been following around. Like I used to do a lot of work in IoT. And so we had been talking about machine learning and AI for over 10 years on different ways of like leveraging machine data and doing things like predictive maintenance and all those sort of use cases. But they're all very narrow in nature, and they're also very engineering focused. And so they didn't really get a lot of like C-suite, like the CEO, they didn't, it's just like, what are you spending money on and what's it going to do for me kind of thing. Like it wasn't as strategic for them as the conversation is today. And so I think more so than ever, I feel like the technology is we're back in the spotlight, right? So whether it's like, hey, how can we adopt AI faster? I think is important. Those outages I mentioned all of a sudden also have the, attention of the C-suite as well. So I think this is a good thing because sometimes when it comes back to those like budgets and things where they're sometimes hard to get, I feel like leadership is starting to understand more the importance of the things that we do, maybe on the infrastructure and application layer that, they just kind of took for granted in the past. And then, there's this other, thing that I always hear. I feel like every time there's a new technology wave, there's always this question of like, am I behind? Am I, what have you kind of thing. So we looked at it as like a maturity cycle. Like last year, we saw a lot of experimentation, right? So, and I'm saying like last year, like 2024, there was just a lot of trial and experimentation. This year, we started seeing people use AI in a more narrow way, but more tied to the business. And I think next year you'll see an acceleration. So, and all of that's going to affect, I think, the decisions and things that we talked about today.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So we have about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that we get to the customer examples. So the last question for our fireside chat, there are a lot of clouds to choose from. It seems it's like a paradox of choice. So can you two walk me through or do like a rapid fire answer on how an organization would narrow it down to just one provider?
Yeah, I can start. I think what we try to do is just partner with the customer, right? We want to make sure that the customer sees us as like their trusted advisor. And then we recommend what's best for the company, right? And there will be some components where we say, hey, look, DigitalOcean is better suited. And then we'll be very honest in the approach where maybe some components are better suited in somewhere else. But ultimately, what has kept customers with us and why customers trust us is because we're honest about the architecture and the experience that they will get with DigitalOcean.
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, cloud buyers, I'll call them, are much more sophisticated than they previously were. Like in many cases in the, let's say, early days of cloud or however you want to think about it, they didn't really know what questions to ask, right? So it was easy to just say, well, you have a really good sales pitch, let's go with you. Now that customers have experience under their belt, now they start looking more specifically around things like the ease of use, like understanding the costs, like understanding the support and how that works. And so all of a sudden now I feel like that maturity of understanding what to look for is just helping customers, ask the right questions and pick the right solution that, again, I'll continue to like sort of use that personality kind of idea of like, the things that fits them best.
All right. I thank you guys. So now I want to talk about how DigitalOcean is helping customers with cloud-to-cloud migrations. And I think it would be helpful for us to do so within the context of a customer example. So Alexis, if you want to answer that question, refer to either of the two examples. Just let me know if you want me to go back and forth.
Yeah, so here at DigitalOcean, we take a very hands-on approach with cloud-to-cloud migrations. Our solution architect team works directly with the customers to plan, move, map out any changes that need to happen with the customer's architecture. So Nobit is a very interesting use case and customer for us. We actually migrated them, I believe, sometime earlier this year when we finalized, and we were continuously, working with them, as Dave has mentioned, to modernize like their environment. But Nobit is an ad tech startup. Since 2019. They connect publishers and advertisers through advanced auction optimizations. They run over 200 billion auctions per month, so 100,000 per second. They migrated from AWS to DigitalOcean. They were running on ECS and decided that they wanted a platform that was more open, that provided them with the controls that they wanted to optimize and tweak their services. So they migrated to DigitalOcean's Kubernetes services. So, and most of, if not all of their savings came from just egress. Just by them migrating over to DigitalOcean, our egress pricing was attracted to them, and they were able to significantly reduce their cloud costs. And then, the next customer is PCAP. So PCAP is a ride-sharing and logistics company based out of Latin America. So PCAP manages more than 1.5 million rides per month, so requiring high-level, real-time infrastructure that can scale to maintain their end users and customers. PCAP actually came from 2 different places and centralized everything on DigitalOcean. So they came from Heroku and AWS, and it's rare to see these savings, but PCAP was able to significantly reduce their costs by like 75% by migrating to DigitalOcean. So, these are examples. These examples show a clear pattern. When customers move to DigitalOcean, they simplify their architecture and significantly reduce their costs, often immediately.
Yeah, wow. I see that 120 to 30,000 figure. That's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for
pretty cool
sharing
use cases.
All right. Alexis, I just want to invite you to touch a little bit more on how DigitalOcean helps the customers. I mean, we talked about it, or you just talked about it within the context of 2 specific customer examples, but let's go a little bit more general, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, for those of you who have not heard of DigitalOcean, or if DigitalOcean is a new company for you, so DigitalOcean is proud, to support a massive and growing global customer base. We currently serve over 3 million developers and businesses in more than 185 countries, ranging from early stage startups to scaling SaaS platforms and DNEs. Our global infrastructure includes 16 data centers and growing, strategically located around the world, enabling high latency, high availability deployments. We support customers like the ones we've mentioned previously, like Nopid, PCAP, SuperMaven, as well as startups across every vertical, from AI and ML to e-commerce. We've launched strategic partnerships with AMD, Laravel, and other very large technology companies. This reach and diversity of use cases gives us deep insights into how to support our customers' success at any stage of growth. Yeah, and this is just like a more or less like a summary of all of the services. And if any of you are interested, we can definitely have more of like a one-on-one conversation. But on the left side of this this slide, you can see our continued investment into what we call like our general purpose cloud. So this remains a strong foundation for that our customers rely on every day. We've enhanced every layer from the compute, storage, networking, managed databases. So we offer a suite of managed databases like MongoDB, MySQL, Postgres, Falcon, OpenSearch. We also offer Kubernetes, as I've mentioned, at platform, and serverless at the PaaS layer. And finally, on top, we have our Cloudways and our marketplace at the SaaS tier. Now, on the right side, this is where our evolution like really comes in. This is our Gradient Agentic Cloud, where we've built what we like to call like the next generation of cloud for the agentic era. Our Gradient infrastructure provides optimized compute. So we've mentioned at the bottom layer, at the IaaS layer for our Gradient infrastructure, we provide GPUs like NVIDIA's H100s, H200s, and AMD's MI300 series. So these are perfect cases for customers wanting to have full control of their inferencing and require GPUs. So layered on top of that is our Gradient platform, which is where we've made even more progress. So this includes everything from agent playgrounds to new capabilities like serverless inferencing, dedicated inferencing, agent routing, guardrails, and MCP servers. So these tools enable customers to build, test, and iterate multi-agent systems quickly and securely. So together, this full stack represents, how we're bridging traditional cloud with the emergent agentic ecosystem. So we've seen customers begin their journey within AI using GPUs and then expand across the broader ecosystem. That's where DigitalOcean really stands apart from like the neoclouds that might just offer GPUs. We provide a complete modern agentic cloud platform capable of running not just AI-specific workloads, but all workloads for our customers.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Alexis, for going over our entire agentic AI cloud platform. I really appreciate that. I think this slide is particularly helpful to break it down, not only in IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, but also to see our AI agentic cloud broken down into those components as well. So thank you. That leads us to the end of our presentation. And I do see that we have some questions, so I will get to that. I just wanted to make sure that you guys were clear on next steps. So we do have a standing offer of getting $200 in credits to try out DigitalOcean. If you are not a customer, we invite you to come in the Cloud Console and try our products and services. And then we have our migrations program offer, which is migrating to DigitalOcean for free with the expert guidance of our solution architecture team, like Alexis has talked about. And then if you have any overall general questions, I invite you to contact our sales team. So I just wanted to thank you guys for the webinar. I really appreciate it. And then I do have one question here. We have about a minute or so left, so I'm going to go ahead and put this up here. How quickly did DigitalOcean develop an IAC solution with a UI that allows users to connect services and automatically generate infrastructure, like infrastructure as a code? So Alexis, I'd imagine this would be a question that you would take.
Yeah, so let me see. How quickly did DigitalOcean develop an ISC solution with the UI that allows users to connect services and automatically? Yeah, so we provide so we connect to Terraform and Pulumi. So we have native support for those services, and then we have partnerships with other companies that specialize in the output of infrastructure as code. But we don't have like a dedicated UI for infrastructure as code. We just leverage Terraform or Pulumi, and then you can kind of like leverage those services if you're using infrastructure as code. Most of the customers that are using infrastructure as code, they keep everything like within Git and their pipeline deployments. Not a lot of them are using the UI, but I believe Terraform offers a UI.
Okay, thank you, LinkedIn user. I didn't realize LinkedIn was anonymous, but maybe they added that as a feature. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining. I hope that you left today with some insights and from our examples and just some insights from our fireside chat from our two experts. And I wanted to take a second to thank Dave for joining us. Thank you so much, Dave. It was a pleasure to have you on. And of course, I wanted to thank Alexis for taking the time to put on this webinar with me. So thank you, everyone, so much. I'll give you about 30 more seconds to scan the QR code, but I appreciate everyone's time. I hope that everyone has a good holiday, whatever they may be celebrating, and be safe. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Bye.